So one of the concerns that I had when I had zero money was what to do in a recession. And by the time I was 40, we bought a house with $310,000 cash. Okay, we were worth over $1 million. And then within a year, we were worth $5 million. And I think that some of the big factors and the big steps that we took along the way are actually things that can really help people in today's situation. Okay, and I have this sneaky suspicion that probably around July, we're going to see very big highs in the stock market. And this is right now May 23rd, okay, Friday, May 23rd of 2025. And I think after that, we're going to start to see some stuff tank because of what's happened over quarter one and quarter two here with negative GDP, especially in quarter one. I think possibly happening in quarter two as well. And then also the job situation is not fantastic for people. It's basically like a 1-to-1 ratio. People are staying jobless for about 6 months at a time. And so there's some signs that we're entering into an issue. There's a whole bunch of other factors that are showing that we are probably going to be entering into a recession. And one of the things back in 2018, we had less than $10,000 in our bank account. And at that time, you would talk to people and they'd say, oh, you got to put it in crypto. You got to do this. You got to do that. You got to do this. And I think that we forget that we're all at different points, okay? And we have to have that in our mind. So when we're entering into an unstable situation, which we currently are, and we see these tax referendums coming through, and we see all these, we're supposedly decreasing spending, and that stuff's happening, right? And then even right now, you're hearing, oh, well, Trump's trying to tank the dollar so that Bitcoin is worth more. And so now all the crypto bros are telling their friends, you got to get into crypto. You got to get into crypto. Now's the time. And then crypto, Bitcoin's at 110, 112. And so you're buying in at this really, really high point when you have no money. And so some of the things get overwhelming and you feel helpless. And so I think it's important to, first of all, walk away from the geese because they're going nuts right now, is to think through the lens of where you're at. So if you have less than $10,000 in your bank account, the first thing you have to do is start the high yield savings and save your money, okay? And just get to the point where you have $10,000 saved up, okay? If you're somebody who's got $50,000 in your bank account, the next thing you got to do is you got to think through, like, okay, what are my own personal goals, okay? And how can I deal with this? What can I do? I want to put some, I got some money now. I want to make sure I'm getting that into my retirement fund. And then you're second guessing yourself because you're going, oh, well, if the economy collapses and I got money in my retirement account, like everything's going to go to hell, so I shouldn't do this. And you also, at this point, might be saving, to purchase a house or anything along those lines. So you have to think through these different scenarios. And I think, the next step then becomes people start to talk about Warren Buffett is keeping cash on the sideline right now. Well, why is he doing that? He's doing that because he's reading his benchmarks and his markers of what he's going to do. And he sees that there's probably is going to be some type of, recession or at least another major pullback. And so you have to recognize somebody pretty smart sees these things. They talk about the markers and they talk about things that you can do. So what does that mean? If you're a $50,000, you have $50,000 in savings and you are about to purchase a house, don't worry about putting money in crypto. Don't worry about anything outside of saving the money if you want to buy a house, saving that money because you need to get out of debt, saving that money so that you can have some type of emergency fund. That's where you're at. That's your situation. And it still goes back to what's that number one aspect? Okay, the number one aspect is that we have to make more money than we spend. So when this comes back down to everything, and you're looking at that as like a $50,000 in savings or $100,000 of cash that you can have at your disposal, you still have to make more money than you'll spend. Okay, you have to. And so what you can do from that perspective is take that next step and say, okay, this is my job. I'm going to have my job, but I'm going to have some type of side hustle. So then I can make extra cash from that side hustle to make myself more valuable. Okay. Now, as you work through that point, let's say you get to the point where you have $100,000, $250,000 saved up, you can start to play around and you can start to question, okay, maybe I should buy crypto now because I have all this money, or maybe I should buy the house. Maybe I need to go through all these other factors. And so because we don't want to have our money be worth less in a year than is worth right now. So if you're a $10,000 person or a $50,000 person, it still comes back to, you got to make more money than you're spending, and you have to be able to put that into, one, a high yield savings, or two, into your retirement, okay, into your 401k, into your SEP IRA, into your 401, or into your Roth, anything like that, right? But then as we get to that $250,000, $500,000 mark, you start to think about it and you're going, oh, well, what am I going to do? Now I do have money. I'm in a little bit more stable situation. I like to think through this lens of having your bag built, okay? You're having your bag, okay? And we've got to prepare based off the scenario we're in and based off the scenario we're projecting, okay? Internally, based off the market, based off of what you're studying, based off of what you're looking at. So if you're at 100K, 250K, 500K that you have available, maybe $1 million, something like that, what I think here, okay, and this is going to be where I want to go into what I'm doing personally, because what I see happening is we're going to see we've seen some crazy drops. We've seen some crazy rises back up. And now here we are, end of May, and the market's all but leveled off for the year, in 2025. The last 2 years, we've seen some substantial growth since 22, right? Based off of averages, we know that we've had 2 years of substantial growth since 22. And we've had pretty good growth since COVID, right? Since COVID, we've seen some substantial growth. I think in my mind, now we're going to start to see a drop off. And then what's going to happen is that people are going to pull out of the market entirely. If you have 250, 500K, you're going to get panicked and you're going to pull out entirely because you're fearing some type of recession. Now, what I think we need to be doing at this point, okay, is now's the time, personally, where we are starting to make our bag in areas that are a little bit more stable, okay? And you're going to have guys telling you to buy gold right now, even though it's at an all-time high. And they're going to tell you to sell. They're going to give you this high level of fear because we also see that consumer fear is relatively high. The thing we cannot stop doing is dollar cost averaging, which means if we're out there and you're a 100K, 250, 500K person, you've got to still put aside, based off the proper budget, let's say you have 150, 200, 250 bucks extra a month, that you can put into the market. This is what I would tell you to do. Every single month, you put it into simple ETFs when you're in this situation. When you think that something bad is going to happen, you don't DCA into some specific stock unless, and I'm going to leave this for the end, I'll get into what stocks I would actually pick, okay? What I recommend, though, is sitting here, staying patient. You're still putting, every 2 weeks, maybe it's 75 to 100 bucks into an ETF like VU, into an ETF like SCHD. People are going to comment, say, SCHD, you're an idiot. Some type of ETF along these lines, okay? The next thing is that you just continue to save. You continue to make more money than you spend. Okay, and this goes back to another video that we talked about. I went over side hustles that everybody can have. but we also have to find that job that we're passionate about, because if we're passionate about a job, we're not looking for a quick way out. If you're passionate about what you're working on and what you're doing, you will be more patient with your finances. You'll be more willing to hold and make better decisions. You won't listen to the crypto bro. You won't listen to the gold bro. You won't listen to the doomsdayers who are out there saying the world's going to end. We just had our credit score as a country just dropped even more by Moody's, and all these things are going to happen. That stuff is accurate, but we can't hold on to it. We still have to dollar cost average every single month into some type of ETF that is low risk, okay? So you have something that is dividend based, or something that is low risk like VU. That's what I would just recommend in that situation. Now, if you have the money and you're able to take more risk on, and you're capable of doing that, and again, if you have 10K or 50K, and I would even argue 100K, you should not do this. You should continue to work towards paying off all debt, trying to have some type of real estate, and getting into those things. Now, and I'm going to get into real estate at the very end of this video. What I recommend, if you're thinking about stocks and you have more money, 250, 500K, you look at the stocks of the companies that are strong. And this is where I'm going to release this. I've never bought stock in Tesla, and I sort of have this Tesla in personal Tesla ticker. Basically, that I'm, at times I could have made a ton of money in Tesla, and I've made some errors, but now I'm still not getting into it, and I probably never will, because we're looking at a company run by somebody who's not present. Okay, and so if you have a leader of a company that's not present and not doing things accordingly, and they're sort of stretching themselves thin, they're going to be overtaken in very key areas strategically. And that's where a company, okay, you can look at this and say, a company like AMD, great leadership, okay, great products being released at the end of this year, great products being released in the beginning of next year. You can look at some companies similar to that. You can look at beaten down stocks, like somebody might look at something like Nike and say, you know what? Nike's been beaten down for years, and they just had a good turnover. And you could potentially look at something like, and I would not recommend this if you don't have a large surplus of money, but if you have a large surplus of money, you might look at even a stock like SoFi, and you could put in, a decent amount of money. Let's just say $10,000, and you're saying, well, if this goes, it's going to go really well. They've got a great leader. They're in a great situation. They're challenging sort of like this old guard industry, the banking industry, and it's something that could run really, really well because of who they have as leadership. So we're looking at a company like AMD. Okay, I think that's a great stock that I am extremely happy to be a part of. A stock like Meta, I would even say, great buy currently. Amazon, another really strong, simple, safe, risky buy, but it's not that risky, right? Because they're very strong companies. They're very successful companies. And you can dollar cost average into that. Now, the reason why I'm not doing that currently is I'm still DCAing into my ETFs because it's lower risk. And then the reason being is that I believe on the back end of this, or during this, when we enter into this possible recession in the next 6 months, or at least where we see another pretty substantial dip, pretty substantial correction drop off, that's when you can start to deploy that cash again into these specific companies, because there's going to be some type of hit. Now, the bag that I'm talking about outside of the low risk, so if, let's say you're 100 to 250K, just put it into the ETFs. Let's say you have a little bit more cash, you want to put it into those into the market on the singular stocks. Let's say something like AMD, Amazon, possibly SoFi, right? A beaten down stock like Nike, that could be something that gets turned around pretty well. You can do that, and you can do it based off of the specific percentage. Okay, I have specific percentages that we follow, that we use as this guideline, while still having cash on the side, while still having our retirement, while still having all these other things. But finally, the big thing for us, because I see some things happening with inflation long term, I see some things happening with interest rates and things along those lines, is that we have a house that's 900 square feet. We have cars with over 400,000 miles now. We were at 380. Well, we might be at like 386,000 miles. And now, because we have land, 25 acres, we have a house paid off that's valued around 350 that we bought in cash, like I mentioned. And we also have another house that we have that only has about a $15,000 left on, that's got about a 4% interest. And then we have another property that's worth close to $1 million that's entirely paid off. The final aspect that I'm doing, and this is something that's could be slightly controversial, is that we're putting money and we're setting up the final bag for us for real estate. And that's where we're getting into purchasing right now, in the process of purchasing a multi-million-dollar property. Now, we're in that situation where we can do that, but we've gotten here by taking the steps. Once we were at the bottom and we had no money, we couldn't even afford a hot water heater, we took steps back up. And when we were at that $10,000 mark, we took the steps that we needed to get to $50,000. When we took that $50,000, once we got that, we got to 100K and we slowly built up. Now we're at this point where we can make this risk and purchase a property, because we have more of that financial backing, we have more financial stability, and we're able to do that. So the biggest part of prepping for the recession is to know what point you're at, okay? And when you know what point you're at, you make the right decisions based off of where you're at. And then finally, I did want to point out another final stock that I'm looking at pretty hard, but I'm not going to do anything likely until September, October. I'm going to continue to look at Adobe, okay? I wanted to point that out here at the end of the video. By that time in the fall, we will have purchased this property that we're looking at, and it's going to be an investment property with 52 acres. That's going to get our real estate portfolio up over probably about 4 million, and then we're going to have another million plus in the markets and in ETFs and in all these other things, in some crypto accounts as well. But the big one that I see outside of AMD, Amazon, Meta, things like that are stable, the singular stock that I'm prepping for currently, and I want to see what happens, is going to be Adobe. But that's only a process that I can do because we took those necessary steps. So don't fear the recession. Don't pull the trigger on all these things if you're not at the right spot. If you're at the right spot, that's when you can do it. So be patient, work hard, okay? Make more money than you're spending. Find a side hustle. Keep doing this. And also on each step, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 250,000. Know what your big picture goals are to get to each level. And also, I think the big factor is know what your goals are at the end and where you want to be, what you want to leave your family with. And ultimately, before you think about that big picture, don't buy the big house. You don't need to. You can build this in an 800 square foot Sears and Roebuck house. You've just got to be patient and just keep grinding away. I hope this helps somebody. Peace.